Welcome to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock, who is the co-founder of videosocials.net and of videointerviewpodcast.com. In every episode, Mark interviews business and organizational thought leaders who share their stories of how they inspire others by making a difference. You can find this show on videosocials.net and YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and almost any podcast platform of your choosing.
Welcome, and I am excited today that my guest is Krista Giannak. And Krista is a ghostwriter and blogger. She boosts credibility for innovative thought leaders. She uncovers the untold stories behind her clients' knowledge. And having once shied away from her own journey, she now speaks about her experiences facing fear as a skier who also happens to be blind. Hi, Krista. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Great to have you. Great to have you. So I always like to start with, what's your story? And just before you get into that, it's to say, part of why I created Inspiring Business is because I have met through my journeys and through all the clients that we've served and worked with, and our Video Socials members, et cetera, that we've worked with. There's so many that inspire me. And in no small way have you inspired me by becoming a member of Video Socials and creating video content for your audience. But what is your story? And I know that you, at one point, you were shying away from your personal journey. And why did you stop shying away from your personal journey?
When I was younger, I was really not so keen on sharing my personal story and anything that might be perceived as a weakness, especially the whole blindness thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't know me, then I wasn't going to share it. So I didn't share it on social. I didn't post about it. I didn't do anything like that. What ended up happening was, at that time, I really, behind that frustration of just dealing with the same old blindness questions and all of that and worrying about it being perceived as a weakness, there was that a sadness, because I wish that more people knew about disability before they ever met me.
Yes.
That's why, whereas now I look at it as not only an education opportunity, but also an opportunity to think about my own story and how I'm coming across. Let's face it, people are going to tell stories about us, whether we want them to or not.
Right.
So we might as well influence the stories that people tell.
So yeah, absolutely.
By embracing my journey, by embracing my personal story, I am then directing or influencing what people are going to say about things that they might perceive as a weakness, what people are going to walk away with, what they're going to remember. Are they going to remember the struggles or the mundane things, or are they going to remember the challenges that I've faced and overcame? And are they going to remember how I then use those to inspire and empower others?
Absolutely. And the thing is that when we do share our stories, our hardships, our challenges, it does inspire others. I mean, there's one of the things I think in marketing that is often underused is the realization that our willingness to be vulnerable to strangers, as it were, as to what we've had to overcome and the challenges that we've faced, does act as an inspiration for others. But how did you do that? How did what were the steps that you took to actually face that and be willing to talk about it?
The skiing played a big part of it, because after I had faced that fear of skiing and done something that I was proud of that a lot of people, sighted and blind, don't attempt, I felt like, wow, I really do have something exciting and fun to share with people that relates to my blindness.
Right.
Before that, I felt like everything was kind of mundane. You know how when you live your own life, you don't see what you do as anything other than ordinary because it's your life. But when you do something that you see as extraordinary or unusual or exciting or inspiring, then suddenly it becomes a lot more empowering and confidence building because you've actually exceeded your own expectations. I think too many times when it comes to people with disabilities, and especially in the business world, there's a lot of emptiness, a lot of like, oh, yeah, you inspire me and great. And oh my gosh, you got out of bed today. That's amazing. Okay, well, are you going to hire me? Because of that kind of those platitudes, I think it is helpful to have something that you can believe in that strengthens you and that also puts you in a better position to share with and to help clients. So in my case, because I've learned to tell my story, because I've learned to approach it from a better perspective, I can then also have that role model conversation with clients and I can empower them through that. When I'm writing for them, I'm going to tell their stories, the stories behind their wisdom, the stories behind their expertise, and essentially make them more appealing because they're more authentic and more human without being, oh, weak or vulnerable, quote unquote. It's more about sharing your humanity and what makes you who you are.
Well, and I think that partially answers at least, part of my next question, which is, what if you don't want to bare your soul, or what if you don't want to show vulnerability? How do you help clients address that?
It's a very common concern because clients don't want to necessarily share, whether it's because they come from a corporate culture where nobody shares anything, or whether it's because they're afraid that they'll share a weakness and failure and they'll be known for that. I look at it as milestones, pivotal moments, life lessons, strengths. So it's not about sharing the struggle or the vulnerability. It's about sharing, it's about leveraging that vulnerability to share your strength and what makes you stand out.
Terrific. And I think in part of what you've accomplished is, people may not know, you have a website, wisewordsThatMatter.com. You're on LinkedIn under Krista Giannak. We're going to have links associated with this podcast and whatever platform that you're on.
Okay, sure.
You've created significant content, and much of that videos, and you've done live streams. How did you overcome you must have had fears and insecurities about being on visual platforms when you're not sighted?
Well, what happened was originally I've gone on other people's videos, but I was really uncomfortable with doing my own. And because I didn't want to share, I didn't want people to judge me by looking at my video, seeing that I'm not making eye contact with them. And then that would be all they ever care about, all they ever see.
Right.
Of course, going up front and right away putting it out there that I'm blind could help, but it also kind of felt like it was getting in my way. Like, oh, do I always have to say blind in every single freaking video? Can I just talk about the good stuff? And what I realized was that Facebook Live was really big at one time a few years ago. People were just fumbling and bumbling. It was okay to stumble and to kind of experiment because the platform was new enough that you could just go live and get hundreds of views right off the bat for doing nothing.
Right.
I realized that, wait a minute, I'm missing out here. I'm watching all the people bumble and fumble and not suffering for it. And I'm like, I'm not so bad.
Yep.
And because of the whole casual live kind of atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
I felt more empowered to actually be imperfect, to be human, to figure things out as I go,
Right.
because everyone knows that live doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
And that progressed then to much later when I joined video socials, where at that point I really wanted to have shorter videos rather than kind of going on streams and spending a long time. I realized the climate had changed on social,
Mm-hmm.
where it wasn't about the long live streams and connecting with people live. It was just more about getting short, sweet content out there that showed you had knowledge and expertise to share the world, and that positions you as the one to help.
Mm-hmm.
That's where video socials helped me a lot, because video socials allowed me to get roundtable feedback from my peers and even my prospective clients
Right.
that gave me some insight into kind of when things worked, when they didn't. It allowed me to experiment, and it was just a few people in a room. It's like, think of it as a few people around the table. If you mess
Right.
something up, the only people who know about it are the few people around the table. I mean, you have to do something pretty drastic for them to spread it over the internet, right?
Well, and I'll take the opportunity, since you brought up video socials, to we're kind of our own sponsor here, but we created video socials as a roundtable event in a virtual environment where we've got, as you said, a handful of people, typically 5 to 8, maybe 9 people that all take turns recording their 2-3 minute videos. And getting practice, and it's a safe environment, and it's an environment, as you said, where people are giving each other feedback as to, look, whenever we're presenting something, if we're presenting to a vacuum, for those of us that cited, that's presenting to this inanimate object called a camera and this inanimate object called a microphone. We created video social so that you actually have an audience that you're presenting to, and that audience is listening for, gee, what's working well? What are you doing that I really like? What are you doing that could maybe use a little improvement, or you might try a different approach at something. And we learn from each other, right? I mean, I'm probably the most active member myself, with the number of videos that I've done and the number of meetings that I've been involved with, but I can't go through a single meeting and not learn something, and not pick up on somebody else's slight variation of style or different wording or something like that. And it can be a completely different topic than what I may be discussing. But how do you? I mean, is that a similar kind of experience for you in creating content, not in the vacuum of
Yes.
cameras and whatnot, but
Yeah, I especially in the beginning when I was doing streams, I really didn't like speaking to no one.
right,
And at least when you're creating content that is a finite amount of time, so 1 to 3 minutes, and you're thinking, sometimes it helped me to think about a particular person in the group even,
right,
or someone I knew would be watching or listening later on. Sometimes I would mention lawyers specifically, since there are a number of lawyers in video socials, and since I've enjoyed working with law firms, just as an example.
right,
It's helped me to direct my content to someone rather than to the black hole, because we all know social media can be a black hole.
right, right. And although you may get feedback in the form of comments or likes or something down the road, you're not getting it until after you post it. And
Yeah.
the other thing that we had in mind with video socials was, why not get real feedback from real people before you decide that you're going to post it. And how many times, I don't know if you've had this experience, I've had it over and over again, where I've presented on a topic my 2 or 3 minutes, and I had 1 or 2 or 3 points that I was trying to get across. And the feedback that I got is that what was most memorable may have been something that I said kind of off to the side, or that was just an ancillary component that really resonated with them, that wasn't even really part of what I was trying to present in the first place. So that does two things. That one expands the value of that piece of content. It helps you title it better, which is always important from a search engine optimization and getting views and getting people to follow and pay attention. But it also gives you ideas for future content that you want to create. So you've really embraced it. And when I say that you've inspired me, here you were, we've known each other for years, but here you were, you showed up one day as a guest and you're going to do videos as a blind person. And I'm like, is there any stopping this woman? No, there isn't. You're absolutely amazing. But I want to come back to what you do, because you're a storyteller. But aside from storytelling, how else can innovators, make more strategic use of the content that they're creating, whatever content that is?
It has to do with thinking of the long game. So if I'm working with thought leaders who have somewhat of an established audience, they're still wanting to be even more known, trusted, remembered, so that empowers them to get more speaking gigs, more attention, more buy-in from clients, and perhaps most importantly, to many people who are thought leaders, it allows them to influence others to take action, whatever that action may be. For me, I look at writing content for clients as, how can we put this all together? How can we work it into the existing framework, marketing strategy? And also, if you're already planning to do one thing, like, for example, writing a blog or writing a book or doing your website or having a professional bio, how much more powerful would it be if you then combine all of those into one single offer? And then you'll end up having all of your content that can then be repurposed for pretty much the next year, or even more if you decide to respin the blog, respin things and take more content out of the books. And, so it can really carry you very far as long as you're strategic about your main selling point, your main business proposition, and where you want the content to take you. The idea is having that calendar, having that credibility, building that connection.
Right. Well, it's staying on brand, but at the same token, expanding, the topics and the perspectives on that brand or on that value proposition that you're bringing across, right? And you talked about repurposing, and one of the things that I won't say that I preach, but I remind people all the time. It's like, the biggest hurdle to get over is getting in the habit of creating regular content, of creating the library in the first place. What you do with that library is almost unlimited, because you can repurpose it in 27 different ways. Everything from combining them into lead magnets that you can put together special reports or longer pieces out of several short pieces put together, checklists and mistakes to avoid and these types of things, but also into courses and online courses and even into a book. And at some point, I may, because we've transcribed all 650 of my videos. Vic, my business partner, asked me a few weeks ago, so when are we going to turn that into a book?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm talking about, doing with clients.
Exactly. So we may be having a conversation about that in the not too distant future. It's an intimidating thought. But at the same token, there isn't anybody else I would consider to help me with it except for you. So I and I'm kind of preaching to the choir as I'm preaching to myself, because it's like, why not? Right. Right now, I frankly don't have the time to focus on it, but it doesn't make sense not to repurpose our content. And that could be as simple as reposting something, because and you tell me if you agree with this. You put out a piece of content. It could be a written blog article, it could be a video, it could be an audio, etc. It's a short piece of content. Maybe you put it out in email format. Maybe you put it out to multiple social media channels, etc. But all the social media channels and our inbox has an extremely short lifespan.
Yeah.
And not any and not nowhere will you get 100% readership or viewership.
Yeah,
there's
never.
there's no such thing, right? So
not unless people are already, and even when people are already paying to access your content, you still won't get 100% because they'll still skim and scan and get what they need.
80%. This is a statistic. I forget where it came from. It was years ago that I read it. I remember that it was a major supplier of it, though, and I believed it to be true. And that is 80% of the books that are purchased are never read. And at once that's sad, and at two, that's an opportunity, right? Because the book you can't repurpose. Once they bought it. You might be able to somehow convince them to take it off the shelf and read it. But you can resend your content. You can repost, not necessarily repost, but you can re-promote that content.
Absolutely.
In a number of different ways, a number of different times, several times over the coming years. So, a great email open rate, as an example, might be 20%. I mean, that's phenomenal. You're doing a fantastic job in getting out an email to a newsletter list, let's say. If 20% of the people open it, well, that's 80% of the people that did not see the content. Why wouldn't you send it again at some point down the road? Now, you don't want to go send it. Oh, I'm going to send it every day until,
Right.
they tell me to stop. Well, you're just going to get a lot of unsubscribes. At the same token, do you think 6 months down the road, somebody's going to remember that, they saw an email? Of course not.
Yeah.
Send it again.
Not to mention, you can send people to the same content with different messages, different focuses.
Absolutely.
And you can, as far as the book goes, you can do what you're going to do, which is taking existing content, reworking it, writing, editing, and putting that into a book. I'm happy to help clients do it that way. You can also work the other way, where if the clients don't have the blog content and they don't have the book, they can then work on it simultaneously, work on both, and have the content in the blog be the same or close to or reworked content in the book.
Right. So I would assume from that, then you might be able to help them kind of sketch out a plan for what is this book going to be about? What are the topics that we want to discuss? And then
Absolutely.
as they're creating content in small, shall we say, bite-sized pieces, 3 to 5 minutes to read, or 2 to 3 minutes to watch on video, or those types of things, and even podcasts, longer form podcasts, can all be used to pull into and draw into that repurposing.
Definitely, especially if it's a thought leader who's already speaking places and has presentations. I can then go through that and organize it, and we can, and if they're not doing enough of that, or they're building their content, but they have some audience, then we can work forward and come up with a strategy together, come up with that calendar together of what is it that your audience most needs to hear.
Right.
As long as clients have an idea of what their audience is looking for, and we can kind of explore that together, then they're in a good position to really leverage all of these different content avenues, whether it's my writing or editing or their video or other types of content, social.
Well, what I'm pulling out of what you've been saying since the beginning here, Krista, is that you're not just a copywriter, you're not just a ghostwriter, you're not just somebody that is going to put pen to paper. metaphorically, as to getting their voice into words that make sense. You're really looking at it from a strategic business perspective and how they communicate with their clients, how they communicate with their prospective clients, and strategically what's going to land the best, what's going to end up producing results. And
yes, very often the clients know the answer to that. They just haven't had it brought out of them yet. Or if they don't know the answer, then maybe they take a step back and do some market research before they bring me on, or maybe I help them with a little bit of that. I actually had a client who had a pretty good idea of what his audience needed to know, but he wanted me to talk to a few of his colleagues for him and get their ideas, their input.
Right. So it's having a conversation, right? And it's having a conversation with our audience. It's having a conversation with, somebody that's helping us to produce content, et cetera. And you don't have to have, a literary degree. You can hire Krista. Because I have, I often say I can barely speak English. I'm singular lingual. And but my mind goes a lot faster than my mouth can keep up with. So
yeah,
I never enjoyed writing, and I have a few hundred blog posts, and I did that because I had a professional editor that interviewed me for that content and helped me organize it. And that's not ghostwriting; it's literally editing. And it's a funny thing, because even with our phone blogger service, which is exactly that, we call and interview our clients for the content, and we're their editors and their publishers. They are the authors. And it sounds, there's parallels in what you do, because it's like in your conversations with them and them telling you their story, telling you, what they want their audience to see and hear.
Absolutely. And if they do need research done, it's in a guided fashion, so that, because otherwise, sometimes if you just give a generic writer a task and tell them to look it up, they'll Google it, and maybe they'll Google your competitors, and you don't trust your competitors, do you?
Right.
It's all about finding those trusted sources, trusted by the clients and trusted by the people who are going to be reading the content.
Well, absolutely terrific. So I did have one more question for you, but I did want to remind people the links to connect with Krista will all be associated with this, but the website is wisewordsthatmatter.com. On LinkedIn, it's Krista Giannak, which is linkedin.com/Krista Giannak. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/wise words that matter. And Krista, what final words of advice might you give somebody?
If you think something's impossible, go out there and find the people who've already done it. That's what I ended up doing to learn to ski. There's a whole community of blind skiers out there, and of volunteers and ski instructors that show us the way. The instructors literally had hands-on training and experience so that they could forge a path forward safely for the blind skier to ski independently. That's how I was able to learn to feel the fall line under my feet, to walk in those clumsy ski boots, and finally to be able to ski and glide and turn and fall loads and loads of times and get back up again. Because the people who can do it, who did something that I didn't know was possible, are the people who showed me the way.
What a brilliant observation, and something that I think we can apply to almost all areas of our lives. No matter what challenges that you face, there's others that have faced either the same or similar, and there's probably some level of community around that can help you. So don't be afraid to reach out. Awesome, absolutely awesome. Well, Krista, you inspire me. You inspire other members of Video Socials, and I know you inspire those in your audience. and the clients that you work with. And I thank you so much for being on our Inspiring Business podcast, and look forward to seeing you again soon at a Video Socials meeting. And thank you for taking the time and sharing your wise words of wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. Your positive comments, likes, and most importantly, your sharing of this show with others is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the Inspiring Business podcast on whatever platform you prefer. You can catch prior episodes on videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the major podcast platforms.